This episode of the Power Ranking Show is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all of your championship finals info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines and the latest matchup reports for this year's NBA and Stanley Cup finals. Bet Online is your sports intel headquarters this season, as they have you covered for all of your insider sports wagering needs, from basketball to hockey to MLB, UFC, and boxing. It is the fastest and the easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your home. Get into the action today. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to join, and be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts.
Well, that's a pretty good read. I mean, that's better than I would say it was Pro Bowl level, Pro Bowl alternate.
There you go. Tyler Huntley level.
Yeah. Marcus underscore Mosher. This is the Power Rankings podcast, aka the Power Rankings Show. You know what I haven't done in a really long time is done this with the light and then looked at you and gone, I am so scared. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Okay, I'm done with that. So if you didn't catch our podcast yesterday, we did some MVP stuff, and it was actually kind of cool because at first I thought I was going to be bored with Marcus's takes, but then I found it to be actually interesting because I didn't realize how crazy some of the odds were. And so it's always kind of interesting to hear Marcus delve into that. But today I'm very interested but skeptical. I'm very skeptical because this is a total going off the path here. Marcus he likes to put together spreadsheets. Okay. And I'm talking about you like you're not here, but he likes to put together these little spreadsheets. And occasionally we talk about greatest things of all time. And we did his top 25 wide receivers last year. This year, he decided to do his top 8 defensive players of all time. And he was telling me about one guy who he really wanted to squeeze on the list, who I don't think made the list after all. So we decided, hey, why not just do a pod on it? So today you are literally getting Marcus's top 8 defensive players of all time. I see the helmet graphics. I got to know what your criteria was. What do you put as the most important thing? Because when it comes to defensive players, there's dominance, there's longevity, there's whether they were named defensive player of the year, whether they were good enough to be considered kind of like overall MVP players. You also are a big versatility honk.
I am.
You like guys that can play inside and outside on the defensive line. You like guys that play special teams. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll shut up and quit talking. But I'm curious.
You nailed it. And this is really hard because you're looking at 60, 70, 80 years of NFL history and trying to cross compare these guys from eras and at different positions. How do you rank a strong safety versus a 3-4 outside linebacker and say which one is better? So this is very much an inexact science. A lot of this is just the guys that I like to watch the most and I thought were the most dominant. And that was kind of my criteria, is when I watch them on my screen, do they jump off the screen? And for the most part, all 8 of these guys do. So listen, I know I left a lot of good guys off this, a lot of Hall of Fame players who are arguably the best ever at their respective position. I understand that. But here's the list.
Yeah, listen, let's give you an easy out right away. Okay, right away. We know there doesn't have to be anyone pre-95 because the game's bigger, faster, stronger now.
That's true.
No, all those guys stink. Anybody that played pre-95 automatically was a truck driver.
I tried to at least get somebody from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s on the list, right? So we can be well represented. Now, you could make a case that I should have put a few more players in the 60s and 70s on this list, but we'll jump into it. We'll start at number 8. Elliot.
Wait a minute, but I gotta stop you. I have to defend truck drivers because when I worked the NFL, whenever somebody would talk about a 1950s player, whatever, they'd be like, "Yeah, but they were playing against truck drivers." It was always truck drivers. Do you know how good an athlete you've got to be a truck driver? Do you not know how hard it is to drive America's highways for 12, 14 hours? I feel like truck drivers get a really bad rap. I bet you truck drivers are a lot tougher than some of the guys on your list. I just wanted to say that. Yeah. One of my good friends is a truck driver.
Yeah, no shot at player number 7 on here. Let's go to number 8 for the Baltimore Ravens. It's Ed Reed. I think he's the best free safety of all time. One of the most dynamic safeties that we've ever seen. 64 career interceptions. I mean, the instincts were out of this world. He was a playmaker. He made plays on special teams. And whenever he had the ball in his hands, he was absolutely electric. What I loved the most about him is first 3 years of his career, 21 interceptions, just unbelievable.
So one of two things happened here. Okay. There's a guy that's not on this list that Marcus very badly wanted to put on this list. And
we'll save him. Don't mention. We'll save him.
I'm not going to mention him. I'm not going to mention him. But he would have been number 8. So either one of two things happened. Either I guilted Marcus into this Ed Reed pick, which is very far from likely, or Marcus is heavily, heavily biased when it comes to Ed Reed. Like Marcus loves him some Ed Reed.
That's exactly what it is. He's one of my favorite defensive players of all time.
But I think when we were going over the guy that you really wanted on here and you asked me, hey, what do I thought? By the way, I don't know what Marcus's list is. I only know the one guy that we discussed. And Marcus said, what do you think about him as a top 8 defensive player? I think the first guy I mentioned, I was like, if you want to go somebody kind of from his era, I would go this guy over Ed Reed, over the guy Marcus really wanted to put on the list. So we'll get to him when we're done. Just real quick on Ed Reed, very big threat with the ball in his hands. I still remember the 2000, I believe it was 2004, was it 2008, Philadelphia. They played him at Baltimore. I think it was 8 because I think it was a Kevin Cobb pass. He intercepted the back in the end zone and took it back 108 yards. For a touchdown. Also remember him completely tricking Peyton Manning on a deep ball in like 2009, where he sold him that he was going to cover the middle of the field. And then he came back around. It was really cool on the top 100 they did on NFL Network. Bill Belichick talked about this play and how it was one of the best plays he had ever seen. And I had been, I think, in the Red Zone studios for that play and was like, man, you know which play I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Unbelievable.
I got a question for you. What do you consider, like in the 2000s, a lot of interceptions in a single season?
7. That's a ton. Yeah, for this era.
I agree. Ed Reed had 7 or more interceptions 5 different times in his NFL career.
Yeah. Just real quick, he sold Peyton Manning that he was going to go cover the deep center of the field, and he had done that, on the game film. So Peyton Manning thought, if I pump fake him here in the center, then I'm going to get him on the corner route towards the flag to Reggie Wayne. And Ed Reed instinctively knew that Peyton Manning had seen that on the tape. So Ed Reed acted like he bit on Peyton Manning's pump fake by taking one step to the center of the field, and then he whirls around and runs to the corner to cover it. I hope I did a decent job explaining that. It was a genius play.
Last thing, 13 career touchdowns for Ed Reed, which is just ridiculous for safety.
Total threat. Football IQ off the charts. Football IQ like Troy Polamalu. That's a guy he gets compared to a lot, although they were different players. But let's go to number 7 because I think we got another defensive back here. If this is Claude Humphrey with the Falcons logo, I'm going to be shocked.
It's not. It's a guy that's actually just over my shoulder here. It's Deion Sanders here at number 7. And actually, I think a lot of people would be surprised that he's this low, but he had to be on the list. I think for my money, the best pure cover corner of all time. You mentioned how much I love versatility. One of the things that I love so much about Deion early in his career, played receiver. You could use him on punt returns, kick returns. You could do end reverses with him. And just like Ed Reed, absolutely electric with the ball in his hands. Teams were terrified to throw at him because they knew if he picked it off, he was taking it to the house. Ed Reed, 13 career touchdowns. Deion Sanders, 22 career touchdowns. He's got to be on the list.
Yeah, I think Deion might be the second best corner I've ever seen. I don't know that I have him in the top 8. He would probably be in my top 10. I think I did this didn't you say you looked and I had this list for NFL.com from, and I think, where did I have DEION?
I think it was right at 8. Yep.
Yeah. So he would be very, very close. So I'm not disrespecting. I think 7 is fine for him. The guy that I would have maybe over him is not on your list. I can mention him later, but I have no qualms with this whatsoever. Ed Reed and DEION, both tremendous threats. You didn't want them picking the ball off.
So the guy that I have at number 6 is one of the hardest debates I have, putting DEION or Rod Woodson, slotting those two guys. I have Rob Woodson at 6. You convinced me on having Rob Woodson at 6. I mean, the longevity part of this matters, right? He played 238 games in the NFL. He played with 17 years. And there was just a stretch from 1989 to 1994 where you just lock him in as an all-pro selection every single year. He played corner, transitioned to free safety late in his career with Baltimore, made 4 straight Pro Bowls as a free safety. Rob Woodson makes the list.
Yeah, I obviously have no issue with this one. Now, when I said DEION's probably the second best corner I've ever seen, Rod is not number 1. But I think Rod was a better overall football player than a lot of guys because Rod could play corner. Rod could force against the run. Rod was a great safety for the Raiders and the Ravens. Let's not forget, he was a key part of that Raiders Super Bowl team against Tampa. And that was year 16, Marcus.
Yeah, he was 38.
16. He's 38 years old as an all-pro safety for the Raiders. And then Rod was actually a really good kick returner early in his career. I think in 89, he made the Pro Bowl as a kick returner. So Rod could do it all. I have no problems with this one either.
Led the NFL in kick return yards in 1989. So pretty impressive.
That was
just a special athlete. He's also one of the only players that we've ever seen have a major knee injury when he tore his ACL early in the year and ended up coming back for the playoffs.
95.
We have not seen that happen since.
Yeah, he's very similar to like a Tyreek Hill or a Patrick Peterson or a Tyler Lockett. I'm trying to think of another guy who basically the team pulls him off of kick returns. We know you're great at it, but we don't want you to get hurt doing this. I can't think of another guy right now.
Antonio Brown, right? Julian Edelman was the same way.
Yeah, you don't want to lose them to that. So I get it. Okay, number 5, we got a Cowboys graphic here. Okay, so I know it's Micah Parsons. So what do you think?
It's a little early for Micah Parsons. No, it's we did need to have somebody at least from the 60s, and we put Bob Lilly here. Now, if you're going to make the argument of like Bob Lilly against Deacon Jones and Mean Joe Green, I think the argument for Bob Lilly is that he was just so consistent. And he played forever, right? He had 11 Pro Bowls in his career. Not only was he on the All-Decade team in 1960, but he was also on the All-Decade team in the 70s as well. Now, we don't have super official sack numbers, but I think the estimate's like around 100. And that's a lot for a defensive tackle. So from 1964 to 1969, he made the Pro Bowl and the All-Pro team every single year. He was a Pro Bowl selection from 1964 to 1973 every single season. He comes in at number 5.
Yeah, I'll try not to deep dive here on Bob Lilly, but I got a lot of grief when I put him pretty high on my list, top 10, because people hate the Cowboys. And I'm like, okay, well, it's not my fault you don't know football history. Sorry, that's my snob comment of the podcast. I might have another one later. A couple things on Bob Lilly. Number 1, he was a defensive end his first 3 years. He was playing out of position. That's why he didn't make the Pro Bowl early, and the Cowboys were awful. They were an expansion team. Bob Lilly was their first draft choice in 61 ever. He had a bad back. So by 74, he was still a really great player, but he was having a hard time with his back. He was in year 14. I think he didn't make the Pro Bowl that year. But Lilly's primary responsibility was to stop the run. And he played in a defense called the flex, where he actually played off the line a little bit to read. He didn't get to attack aggressively like Aaron Donald gets to all the time. That's why Bob Lilly didn't have big sack numbers. But I know when Bill Walsh in 1999 for Sporting News gave his top 4 players of all time, they were Jim Brown, Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, and Bob Lilly. So, I'm going to listen to Bill Walsh. So I have zero problem. So far, I think this list is great. I'm actually mildly shocked.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I did 15 minutes of actual work yesterday.
All right. Number 4.
Ronnie Lott. One of the reasons that I have Ronnie Lott so high is I value the guys that could play in any era, whether that's in the 60s and the 70s or the 80s and 90s or in today's game. And I can't think of a player that would be better in today's game than Ronnie Lott. Ronnie Lott started his career as a cornerback. Then he transitioned to free safety later in his career. And then by the end of his career playing strong safety, you could play him in the box. You could play him in the slot. You could play him outside. Wherever he played, he was going to be an all-pro player. I think he is the best defensive back at all time. And that's why I have him at number 4.
Yeah. With Ronnie Lott, you're talking about one of the greatest rookie seasons in the history of the league. The guy comes in for the 49ers. He plays at corner. We know he would make his ultimate career at safety. He has 3 interceptions for touchdowns his rookie year. I think he had 9 interceptions as a rookie. He makes all-pro, and the 49ers win the Super Bowl. I mean, that's about as good a rookie season as you can have. He made the Pro Bowl his first 4 years in the league at corner. Finally, in 85, they realized, look, this guy is a stud against the run. You're talking about a corner getting 100 tackles, okay? Mm-hmm. And he didn't really have great speed. So they eventually moved him to safety later that year in 85. By 86, he became the best safety in the league and ended up making several all-pro teams as a safety. Played a really long time. There's nothing bad you could say about the guy. The ultimate enforcer. The only problem with him playing in any era is a lot of his hits in the 80s
wouldn't have been illegal.
Yeah, exactly. But just in a team leader, too, I should say. The 49ers are not the 49ers without Ronnie Lott.
I would also say I really value the guys that are like the all-decade team, right? Because it just matters. Yeah. Like, you need to be the best player at your position during a decade to be on this list. And he was it twice, right? He was on the 80s and the 90s all-decade team. So Ronnie Lott comes in at number 3.
That's my only problem, I will say, is
the 91 was a
little reputation. Honestly, I thought Woody should have made that list instead of him because Woody played the entire decade. But Darren Woodson, as much as I love him, was not as impactful a player as Ronnie Lott, and Darren Woodson would be the first one to tell you that. Let's go to number 3. Staying in the NFC West, I think I know who this is.
Yeah. It's our first current player, right? It's our only current player, Aaron Donald. You and I have talked about Aaron Donald, where he should be at on this list, and we've kind of argued whether he should be at number 2 or number 3. But I think as of right now, 3 is the right spot for him. For my money, he's the best pure defensive tackle we've ever seen. Despite being pretty undersized for the position, I mean, he's just unstoppable. And I think the Super Bowl run in 2021, when he was so great in the playoffs, he made the game-winning play in the Super Bowl, really cemented his legacy. And again, I think he deserves to be here at number 3.
3-time Defensive Player of the Year award winner, which is awfully impressive. Kind of a knifer as a player, like knife through the guard in the center. Not really the space-eating kind of defensive tackle. No. And ironically, I think because of that, he's kind of a throwback to an earlier era because of his size and the way that he could play defensive tackle. Because when he came out, what was he, 280?
285, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, at Pitt. So I know you're shocked I actually got his college. That's a first. But when I was talking about Bob Lilly and his responsibilities, that was not to take away from Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald plays in the era he's in, the way the position's supposed to be played, just like Bob Lilly played the position the way it was supposed to be played in the era that he was in. Yep. The thing that I lament, and I joke with Marcus all the time privately, is 20 years from now, people are going to be like, oh, the game's bigger, faster, stronger now. Aaron Donald couldn't play with these guys. Yeah, give me a break. Okay, let's go to number 2. I know who this is.
Number 2, Reggie White. So if you just had Reggie White's 8-year career in Philadelphia, that's a Hall of Fame player that probably makes this list. Maybe not at 2, but he definitely makes the list. In those 8 years, 124 sacks. I believe 6 all-pro selections during that time, made the Pro Bowl every single year outside of his rookie season, where he was still absolutely dominant. 13 sacks during his rookie season. Just phenomenal. Then he goes to Green Bay at the age of 32. And in 6 years with the Packers, he has 68.5 sacks. And then he plays with the Panthers at the end of his career, 5.5 sacks, 198 career sacks. He's got one of the most unstoppable pass rush moves that we've ever seen. If you go watch some of those old videos with John Madden talking about the hump move, it's so cool to watch. I think my favorite play ever is him just tossing Chris Carter to the side. Reggie White, best, I'm going to say, pure defensive end in NFL history.
Oh, man. On Thanksgiving, the famous Jason Garrett, Brett Favre duel in 94. In the first half, they had to play Larry Allen at right tackle.
It was so bad.
Oh, my gosh. He literally throws Larry Allen.
The strongest player in NFL history just throws
him. Who was 335 pounds. And it was just awesome. Reggie White could play inside. He could play outside. If I'm not mistaken, so he played in 1984. I think he played for the Memphis Showboats, I believe, in the USFL. But I think he also played in spring 85 for the Showboats. So that 13 sack season that you're talking about for Philadelphia was in the fall. That's a lot of football. But by 86, he was maybe the best defensive end in the game. 87, he had 21 sacks in 12 games. I think in 98 with the Packers, when he's already in his mid-30s, he had I want to say 15 sacks, something like that.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, man. He had multiple sacks against Drew Bledsoe in Super Bowl 31. The only disingenuous thing here is I know Marcus really wanted to put Aaron Donald above Reggie White because he has tried to argue that with me before.
No, I think it's possible that Donald gets there. It's hard to project the way the rest of the career goes for Aaron Donald. Like if he plays for 6 more years and has 55 more sacks, then I think we can have that conversation. And I would put him there, but we just don't know what the rest of Aaron Donald's career is going to look like.
Does he get to number 1?
No, I don't. I can't see anybody passing number 1 for a long time.
So let's roll her out.
It's Lawrence Taylor, right? I mean, he's the gold standard for defensive players because, as you told us on last night's podcast, he's one of 3 players ever to win the NFL MVP award despite being a defensive player. He is the most dominant football player I have ever seen, not just on defense, just overall. I mean, you had to know where he was at all times. He changed the way teams played offense. He changed the way teams valued left tackles, right? Because before, left tackles were always valuable, but now you have to have somebody that's athletic enough to keep up with the Lawrence Taylor, but also powerful enough to handle him in the run game. 142 sacks. I know that feels a little bit low compared to some of these other guys, but I'm telling you, he is absolutely dominant.
Well, a couple things, a lot of things on Lawrence Taylor. First of all, his responsibilities when he came into the league were not to rush the passer all the time. And, he had 9.5 sacks as a rookie, which may not, fire up your jets. But, dude, for a guy that's having to cover the back out of the backfield, again, in 1981, your first responsibility as an outside backer is the run. And you're still picking up 9.5 sacks.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. I think every team in the league would take a rookie outside edge rusher getting 9.5 sacks. A couple other things on Lawrence Taylor. 1984, 83, I watched tape of him against Washington, and Joe Gibbs literally was not going to let the man beat him. He triple teamed him. And when I say triple teamed him, I mean legitimately triple teamed him. It was like a little mob around Lawrence Taylor. He's the only guy I've ever seen single-handedly win a football game. I did a YouTube video on it. Check it out. It's on YouTube. It's 1982 against the Lions. It's a 5-minute video, and it'll just blow your mind. 1984, this is my favorite one ever. He plays Washington. They're in New York. The Giants are winning the game, like 40-14 or something like that. This is a good Washington team. CBS runs a graphic that Lawrence Taylor has blitzed 9 times in the game on 74 plays. Only 9 times out of 74 defensive plays. In those 9 plays, he had 2 sacks, a strip fumble, and I don't remember how many tackles. And I asked you, I remember calling you, I don't know if you remember this. It said, hey, if the Cowboys defense played 70 plays on the field, how many of those would Micah Parsons be rushing the passer? I said conservatively 28. What do you think?
Around there.
Pass rushes. Okay.
Around there.
And Lawrence Taylor's getting 2 sacks in his 9 rushes. He did not rush the passer all the time early in his career. He had to play inside linebacker in 1983 because of injuries for a few games. So Sports Illustrated named him first team All-Pro inside linebacker and outside linebacker because he was great at that too. The guy literally could do it all. Last thing, 88 against the Saints. The Giants have to have the game. Taylor has a separated shoulder and they had to put him in a harness. And one-handed, he beats the Saints tackle and gets like 2.5 sacks. And it's awesome. It's on YouTube. It's awesome. Best defensive game I've ever seen by any player. This is an easy number one.
Yeah, there you go. So overall, what's your biggest complaint with the list?
Not a lot, bro. Not a lot. Now, I think I'd have DEION a little bit lower.
Can I tell you the one thing I had?
Yeah.
I had a really hard time leaving Mean Joe Green and Deacon Jones off the list. But part of it too is for me, I just didn't get to watch those guys as much. Now, Bob Lilly is just, to me, he's a tier above those guys. And I think you have to keep him on the list. That's just not me being a Cowboys honk or anything like that. It's just, I think he was so much better that he's got to be on here. But man, it was hard leaving him and those two guys and Dick Butkus off this list.
I've got Mean Joe and Bob Lilly kind of on a par. Deacon Jones, I think, he's an isolated guy. He is a unique dude in NFL history, and he was a sack machine. Absolutely. I think he had 100 sacks in a 5-year period in the 60s. I think I would probably put those two guys on and leave off your 7 and 8. But if I left off your 7 and 8, they would be 9 and 10.
Sure.
So that's why I'm talking about DEION and Ed Reed, and you can't have all defensive linemen on the list either. And we've got no middle linebackers. So there's no Joe Schmidt here. There's no Dick Butkus here. There's no Mike Singletary here. There's no Ray Lewis. Patrick Willis, who Marcus and I think if he played longer, could make a really good argument for this list as well. Just a couple other names, random names real quick. Merlin Olsen was an insanely great player for the Rams. Gino Marchetti, a great Colts defensive end from the 50s. From our era, the guy that Marcus left off that we really debated on the phone was J.J. Watt. So you just want to mention him for a minute and what you were thinking there?
Yeah, because I care so much about the peak of your career. Like how well do you do in a 3 or 4 year run when you're at the peak of your powers? And J.J. Watt was as good as anybody from 2012 to 2015. He had 69 sacks, including 10 forced fumbles, 190 QB hits. I mean, he was just absolutely dominant. He was an all-pro selection all 4 years.
Batted balls, a lot of batted balls.
Oh, gosh, yeah. 41 pass deflections, and he was a defensive player of the year 3 times during that 4-year stretch.
Yeah, batted balls are important, and it's more about timing than it is your size and knowing when that quarterback's going to throw the ball. I would have J.J. Watt probably at 11. That's tough, 11 or 12, but I would be willing to hear an argument for that. When Marcus talked to me about it, I offered Ed Reed over J.J. Watt. I just think it's a lot harder for a defensive back to win Defensive Player of the Year than it is for a defensive lineman.
Sure, it is.
But other than that, man, I don't know if I'm probably missing a couple of guys. But I think overall, I mean, I could name some guys from the 40s and 50s. I'm not going to do that here, but M. Tunnel is a guy, 79 interceptions, but it's not your fault. But let me just say this. It is so hard for defensive players to stand out or be named MVPs of the league that when they play at that kind of level, like Aaron Donald has or Reggie White has or Lawrence Taylor, you're literally talking about guys that should be considered as the greatest players of all time. And they're always lag behind Tom Brady, Jerry Rice, Jim Brown, Walter Payton. That's tough because if you're talking for one game, who's the most impressive player I've ever seen? It's probably LT. I don't know that I would have him number 1, but he certainly would make my top 5 greatest players ever.
Last thing before we head out, Elliot, if there's one active player in the NFL outside of Aaron Donald that has the best chance to make this list, who would it be for you?
Well, this is going to be awfully, awfully, awfully premature. But when a defensive back comes into the league and they're the best corner in the game as a rookie, that really raises my eyebrows because I've never seen that before. I've never seen a corner. DEION was not the best corner in the league in '89 when he came in. Sauce Gardner, was he not the best corner in the league last year? I've never seen that before. I think the easy answer for me to give you would be Myles Garrett. Maybe even, obviously, Micah. I think Fred Warner, by the way, given, again, his assignments are to cover, a lot of times, cover downfield. It's different. He's not going to get the sacks, but I got to go with Sauce Gardner. I've never seen that before. That may be an odd answer, but that's my answer.
The only one that I'll say has a chance for me would be Von Miller, just because he's already on the all-decade team from the 2010s. He's won 2 Super Bowls. Now, I wonder how this injury is going to affect him, but he's got the sack totals already. He's been a Super Bowl MVP. If the next 3 or 4 years go really well and like Buffalo wins a Super Bowl because he plays really well, I think he has a chance to sneak in here.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do the next 8. I said I would do the next 8 on the running backs, and I didn't. I think I'm going to do the next 8 on this, working off your list. But that's it for us today. If you want to learn about any more of Cowboys history, listen to Locked On Cowboys. Marcus does that with Landon McCool. He also does a Dynasty podcast, which is kind of cool. And he also covers the Raiders for USA Today Raiders Wire. He is at Marcus_Mosher on Twitter. I'm at Harrison NFL on Twitter. And we will talk to you guys either tomorrow or the next day. Take care, everybody.